thank you to him. Let's get a word from Andrew Montford from Net Zero Watch on this one. Andrew, good afternoon to you. It was undoubtedly a catastrophe. To have anything that can knock out this level of crucial infrastructure over such a wide area, over multiple countries, is clearly extraordinary. I think most of us might have thought, without really knowing, might have thought that such a thing isn't really possible in the 21st century. There's stuff in place that protects against that, but apparently not. It wasn't a cybercrime. This question of whether it was to do with the backup or the lack of backup, really, because of an over-reliance on solar and wind. What is your response to that? And good afternoon, by the way.
Good afternoon. No, I don't think backup is the problem. The thing is, it's to do with the stability of the grid. Grids have faults all the time. Things that are connected to the grid go wrong. And the natural tendency of grids is to fall apart because supply and demand always has to equal on an electricity grid. Yeah. Now, if you have gas-fired power stations, they bring something called grid inertia to the party, which essentially naturally stabilizes the grid. So that if there's a fault, the fault then propagates throughout the grid rather slowly, which means that the grid managers can fix it. The problem is you don't get any inertia with wind and solar. So if you have a grid that's dominated by wind and solar, as the Spanish grid is, then if you get a fault, it's very difficult to contain it. It spreads essentially almost instantaneously in microseconds, and you can lose the whole grid. Now, you then have an added problem of the Spanish grid is connected to the French grid. Now, that's a tricky thing to manage at the best of times. If you get this big fault on the Spanish side, then it'll trip the French side and it'll trip the Portuguese side, which is what we think happened. So, yeah, the problem is to do with wind and solar. We have exactly the same problem here. We have too much wind. We don't have as much solar but as the Spanish do, but we have lots of solar. And our grid is running with very little inertia. That is potentially a huge problem. Now, we saw this back in about 2019. There was a wind farm tripped off the grid and it took out most of the eastern side of England. And, 1 million people or something were cut off there. As we get more wind and solar, this will become a higher risk. The grid managers are trying to do something about it, but it's very, very difficult. You need highly sophisticated electronics to try to deal with it, and nobody's quite sure whether it's really going to work in future.
Yeah. So in principle, there might be a way to address the problem, even if the reliance was predominantly on non-fossil fuel technology. But at the moment, no one's actually come up with it. But we're allowing this technology to kind of run free, as it were, without a backup, which is like kind of having a building without a generator.
Yeah, it's something like that. There are technologies out there that, I mean, they have been deployed and they're out there, and we haven't had problems in the UK since, as I say, I think it was 2019 that we last had a major blackout. But it may be that the instabilities of the grid become too much for it, and we do get problems in future. We have this other problem. A lot of our grid inertia comes from the Drax power station in North Yorkshire, which burns wood chips imported from America, and they're trying to close that down because that's very environmentally unfriendly. But of course, they can't really close it down because we'll lose even more of our inertia, and the grid will become even more unstable. We've got ourselves into a real pickle. Is the general theme here?
Indeed. There's an interest, while you're with us, Andrew, an interesting intervention from Tony Blair. I think we're all aware that every now and again Tony Blair's name crops up, and normally we instinctively begin to gnaw our own elbows when we hear the name. However, on this occasion, it's rather interesting because apparently he's attacked Keir Starmer's net zero plans and called for a radical reset of the government's green agenda. He said it was wrong that people were being asked to make financial sacrifices and changes in lifestyle when they know that their impact on global emissions is minimal. He said politicians must face inconvenient facts that show that any strategy based on phasing out fossil fuels was doomed to fail. Fascinating. And he's an unofficial advisor to the Prime Minister.
Absolutely. I mean, it really was quite a turn up for the books. This new report that the Tony Blair Institute has produced, and Tony Blair's written the foreword. And my initial reaction to it was, well, where have you been for the last 10 years?
Good
He's
point.
saying we shouldn't be calling people climate deniers, and people have been saying that for years, and he's never said a thing about it. It may just be that he's detected which way the wind is blowing, and he wants to be on the right side of history. Having said that, the rest of the report was very much in the same vein as everything else we've heard for the 10 years. So it was all about alleged climate crises and emergencies and that sort of thing. So yeah, mixed messaging from the Tony Blair Institute, I think, was.
Who'd have thought it, eh? Listen, Andrew, Andrew, thank you for your time. Andrew Montford, Net Zero.